Imagine waking up in a world where every breath you take could be your last. A time when survival wasn't just hard, it was almost impossible. Disease, famine, war, and an unforgiving environment weren't just occasional threats. They were your daily reality. But what if I told you there was a moment in history so catastrophic that it makes all other hardships seem small in comparison? Today, we're diving into the absolute worst time in human history to be alive. What was it like to live in such a nightmare? How did people endure the unimaginable, and could you have survived it? Stay tuned, because what you're about to discover will forever change the way you see history and your own life. When we think about the hardships of early human life, it's easy to romanticize survival as a simple game of hunting, gathering, and braving the wilderness. But here's a reality check. Compared to other human species, Homo sapiens have had it relatively easy, and that's something you should be incredibly grateful for. Why? Because for many of our ancient relatives, life wasn't just hard. It was a relentless, brutal grind, often cut short in ways that would make modern tragedies look tame. Imagine existing in a world so hostile that your chances of making it past childhood were slimmer than you'd ever want to believe. Take, for example, Homo habilis, a human species that lived around 2 million years ago. They didn't just have it bad, they had it comically, catastrophically awful. In fact, research suggests that their lives were so short and unforgiving, most of them never even saw their teenage years. Let that sink in. The average lifespan of a Homo habilis was estimated to be just 12 years old, barely enough time to grow up, much less survive. And here's the kicker. It might have been even worse than that. A study of 26 random specimens revealed a glaring lack of newborns and infants, hinting that infant mortality was sky high, dragging the life expectancy even lower. Now, imagine a world where you're not just battling predators or harsh climates, but also your own body. That's the cruel reality Homo habilis faced every day. At an average height of less than 4 feet, 1.2 meters, and weighing only about 60% of what modern humans do, they were the smallest members of the human family tree. Their stature made them slow, vulnerable, and often easy targets. The odds were stacked against them in every conceivable way, making Homo habilis not just one of the most unfortunate human species, but possibly the absolute worst humans to have ever been. But what exactly made their lives so unbearably brutal? Why did everything, from their biology to their environment, seem determined to keep them from thriving? Let's dive into the harsh realities that made their existence the ultimate survival nightmare. A small body in a dangerous world is already a disadvantage, but for Homo habilis, it was even worse. Not only were they small, averaging under 4 feet in height, but their skeletal structure lacked the robustness that could have helped compensate for their size. This made them incredibly vulnerable to injuries, and here's where things get even trickier. These early humans were partially arboreal, meaning they spent a good part of their lives in the trees. While you'd think this would offer some safety from ground predators, it also came with serious risks. Like modern chimpanzees, who often experience at least one major fall in their lifetime, it's highly likely that Homo habilis also faced similar dangers. But unlike chimps, habilis wasn't as well equipped for climbing. Despite being more ape-like compared to modern humans, having longer limbs and slightly ape-like hands and feet, they weren't as agile as their tree-dwelling cousins. This mix of adaptations reflects their place in human evolution as one of the earliest members of our genus, living between 2.3 and 1.65 million years ago. Now, climbing was undeniably useful in their predator-filled environment. For most animals, it's an excellent survival tool, allowing quick escapes from danger. But for Homo habilis, the benefits of their climbing ability were severely undercut by one fatal factor: their diet. These small, vulnerable humans weren't surviving on just fruits and leaves. In fact, their diet leaned heavily towards meat consumption. Their disproportionately large incisors were ideal for cutting through flesh, and their thick, powerful jaws were perfect for biting and tearing meat. While this gave them access to a calorie-rich food source, it came with a deadly trade-off. They had to leave the safety of the trees to hunt, and it didn't stop there. Their love of meat, particularly fish, forced them to venture near water, a habitat rife with predators of its own, like crocodiles. The act of hunting itself exposed them to even more danger. It wasn't just what they ate, but how they got it. that made their existence precarious. For a species already struggling against a hostile environment and their own physical limitations, their reliance on a meat-heavy diet often turned a survival advantage into a life-threatening risk. In a world this harsh, the odds weren't just against them, they were downright merciless. For some reason, Homo habilis decided to specialize in scavenging, a strategy that, when you think about it, seems almost comically doomed. Picture it, a small, fragile human, lacking big muscles, advanced tools, or any significant size advantage, wandering into a kill site and trying to claim scraps. Their technology consisted of basic stone tools, essentially the prehistoric equivalent of bringing a butter knife to a lion fight. Realistically, they could only defend carcasses from smaller threats like jackals or cheetahs. But here's the thing. That didn't mean much when you were surrounded by an entire ecosystem of massive, hungry predators ready to fight for the same food, or worse, for you. Homo habilis lived in East and South Africa, an environment crawling with some of the deadliest carnivores to ever exist, and not just one or two, over 30 species of predators have been identified in their vicinity. For these early humans, surviving wasn't just about finding food, it was about not becoming food. Every day was a game of Russian roulette with nature, where losing meant ending up on the menu of a wide array of predators, each with its own uniquely horrifying method of hunting. So, if you were a Homo habilis, life meant constantly looking over your shoulder, hoping you wouldn't become the next victim. Among the many predators that haunted their lives, one stands out as particularly nightmarish: the Megantereon, a jaguar-sized, saber-toothed cat. But don't let the jaguar comparison fool you. This beast was built like a tank. While it shared the general body shape of a jaguar, it was more heavily muscled and equipped with limbs the size of a lion's, complete with massive paws tipped with razor-sharp, recurved claws. These claws weren't just for show. They were designed to pin and tear into prey, and for a hapless Homo habilis, they spelled certain doom. Once caught, the experience only got worse. The Megantereon's mouth was a collection of sharp, serrated teeth that could tear flesh like paper, with two terrifying canines that would pierce the throat, severing arteries and nerves. If there's a silver lining, death came quickly in most cases, with unconsciousness following within seconds. But not always. In rarer instances, victims might endure something far more horrific. The predator would engulf its prey's entire head in its jaws, a macabre end that sounds like something out of a horror movie. For Homo habilis, this wasn't just an occasional danger, it was a near-daily reality. In a horrifying twist of fate, we actually have proof that one unlucky Homo habilis met a gruesome end at the jaws of a predator. A known human specimen was discovered with puncture marks in its occipital bone, the back of the skull. But here's where it gets truly chilling. The angle of the bite revealed that the attack didn't come from behind, but straight on. In other words, the predator, likely the dreaded Megantereon, had clamped its massive jaws over the entire head of this unfortunate early human. This method of attack wasn't just brutal, it was horrifyingly effective. Beyond causing severe skull and brain trauma, it's believed that the saber-toothed cat could kill by smothering its victim, blocking the nose and mouth with its enormous jaws and suffocating them to death. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the Megantereon didn't just hunt Homo habilis occasionally, it seems to have developed a downright taste for them. Evidence from carbon isotopic analysis shows that these predators consumed so many habilis individuals that it noticeably altered the isotopic signatures in their remains. To put it simply, Homo habilis was on the menu a lot more often than other animals hunted by predators of the time, and unfortunately for these early humans, the Megantereon wasn't their only nightmare. The terrifying Dinophilis, another formidable predator, also stalked the same habitats, likely preying on habilis regularly. But the nightmare roster doesn't stop there. Two other apex predators, Homotherium and Machairodus, were also in the mix. Let's pause on Machairodus, because this predator wasn't just big, it was one of the largest felids ever to exist, with some species tipping the scales at a staggering 405 kilograms, 893 pounds. That's comparable to modern polar bears, or the infamous Smilodon. To make matters worse, Machairodus wasn't just big, it was a deadly combination of power and agility. With short legs unsuitable for long chases, it relied on explosive jumps to ambush prey, making escape nearly impossible. Even climbing a tree wouldn't save you, as this massive cat could easily leap to snatch you from the branches. And while smaller, Homotherium was no less terrifying. Its broader, shortened canines and incisors were uniquely designed for crushing and ripping flesh, leaving little hope for any unfortunate habilis caught in its path. For Homo habilis, the world wasn't just a dangerous place, it was an unrelenting death trap. With predators like these lurking in every shadow, survival wasn't just hard, it was almost a miracle. Imagine weapons so ferocious that they could both pierce and shred with terrifying efficiency. That's exactly what evolution crafted for some ancient big cats. Their teeth weren't just sharp. They were equipped with irregular wave-like serrations called crenulations. These natural killing tools didn't just slice through flesh, they punctured and tore simultaneously, making each bite uniquely lethal. These cats were the ultimate predators, a nightmare for any early humans unlucky enough to cross their path. But, as much as they were a menace to our ancestors, they weren't the only creatures that turned prehistoric Earth into a survival horror. Enter the hyenas, another family of predators that seem to have a particular taste for our hominin ancestors. Like their feline rivals, hyenas came in many shapes and sizes, but two species stand out as especially terrifying: Chasmoporthetes and Pachyrhinocuta. The latter, Pachyrhinocuta, was nothing short of a bone-crushing behemoth. This wasn't your average scavenger, it was one of the largest hyenas to ever walk the earth, rivaling the size of a lioness. With a bite force that ranks among the strongest of any land mammal, it could pulverize bones like dry twigs, giving it easy access to the nutritious marrow inside. For our scavenging ancestors, this was a disaster. Not only did Pachyrhinocuta likely dominate carcasses they wanted to scavenge, but it probably hunted in packs, meaning if one found you, the rest wouldn't be far behind. And in true hyena fashion, they weren't likely to wait for you to die before making you dinner. They often consumed prey alive, a fate anyone would dread. As horrifying as Pachyrhinocuta was, the Chasmoporthetes might have been even worse in some ways. This smaller, nimbler relative was part of a group of hyenas often described as dog-like. They were sleek, agile, and likely hunted in large, coordinated packs. At first glance, their more fragile build might seem less intimidating, but don't be fooled. Their speed, numbers, and relentless pursuit made them a nightmare all their own. In short, whether you were up against the crushing power of Pachyrhinocuta or the ruthless efficiency of Chasmoporthetes, early humans faced a terrifying reality. Survival was never guaranteed. Hyenas are some of the most misunderstood animals on the planet, and the more you learn about them, the more fascinating they become. For starters, did you know that hyenas aren't actually part of the dog family, but are more closely related to cats? Their evolutionary lineage places them in a unique category all their own, giving them traits that set them apart from almost every other predator. Take their jaws, for example. A hyena's bite force is one of the most powerful in the animal kingdom, capable of crushing through bone with ease. This ability not only helps them devour their prey completely, bones and all, but also gives them an edge when scavenging. Hyenas can crack open the remains of a carcass that other predators have left behind, accessing the highly nutritious bone marrow inside. But don't make the mistake of thinking hyenas are just scavengers. Spotted hyenas, in particular, are formidable hunters, responsible for killing as much as 95% of their food in some regions. They hunt in highly coordinated packs, using their incredible stamina and intelligence to run down prey that's much larger than themselves, like zebras and wildebeest. Speaking of intelligence, hyenas are among the smartest predators. Their complex social structure, led by dominant females, rivals that of primates in terms of hierarchy and group dynamics. Studies have shown that hyenas can even solve puzzles faster than chimpanzees, a testament to their sharp problem-solving abilities. And if you think their social lives end with hunting, think again. Hyenas are famous for their eerie, laughter-like calls, but that sound is far more than just creepy ambiance. Each laugh carries unique information, from the individual's age to their social rank, allowing hyenas to communicate with one another over long distances. The more you uncover about hyenas, the clearer it becomes that they're not just the villains of the savannah. They're complex, adaptable, and incredibly skilled survivors. Whether it's their matriarchal societies, bone-crushing strength, or hauntingly intelligent eyes, hyenas deserve a second look and maybe even a little respect. Picture this. You're surrounded by a pack of hyena-like predators, not just a couple, but a whole small army of them. These weren't the typical scavengers you might think of today. These were chasmoporthetes, the running hyenas. And let me tell you, their method of attack was far from a quick, painless end. While a single giant hyena, like Pachyrhacota, could finish you off with one crushing bite, chasmoporthetes delivered a prolonged and painful demise, tearing into their prey piece by piece. But the real danger didn't come just from their numbers, it was all about their legs. These creatures were built for speed, with limbs remarkably similar to those of cheetahs. This is why they earned their nickname as the hunting hyena. Unfortunately for Homo habilis, our ancestors were not known for speed. At best, they could manage some endurance running, but that was no match for the explosive pace of chasmoporthetes. Making matters worse, these predators weren't casual meat-eaters, they were hypercarnivores, meaning over 70% of their diet came from meat. And their teeth? Sharpened edges that oddly resembled those of big cats, perfectly designed to slice through flesh. In short, once these hyenas had you in their sights, escape wasn't likely. As terrifying as these dog-like hyenas were, they pale in comparison to what awaited Homo habilis in the water. Enter the ancient crocodiles, giants that turned rivers and lakes into death traps. For early humans, fishing was a necessity, but they didn't have the luxury of rods or spears. No, they fished with their bare hands, practically begging to become crocodile bait. And these weren't just any crocodiles. They were enormous, monstrous members of the genus Crocodylus. Two of the most infamous species were Crocodylus thorbjarnarssoni and Crocodylus anthropophagus. If that last name, anthropophagus, makes you uneasy, it should. It literally means human eater. Unlike modern crocodiles, which are already formidable, these ancient beasts were significantly larger, and they had a taste for hominins. We know this because their dining habits left behind haunting evidence. In one fossil site, 2 juvenile Homo habilis were found with brutal damage to their legs and feet, wounds that matched the bite marks of Crocodylus anthropophagus. These riverside nightmares didn't just hunt, they lurked, waiting patiently for their prey to come too close to the water's edge. For Homo habilis, venturing near the water was a gamble they had to take, but one that often ended in their demise. Now imagine this. You're near a riverbank, maybe fishing or just quenching your thirst, when suddenly the water explodes in a violent ambush. A massive crocodile bursts forth, targeting your legs with terrifying precision. Once it has a hold of you, there's no escape. It drags you into the water, either drowning you outright or using the infamous death roll to tear your limbs clean off. Sounds horrifying? Well, that's exactly what happened to some unfortunate Homo habilis, as evidenced by the fossil record. And the culprit behind these gruesome deaths? Crocodylus anthropophagus, an ancient crocodile that was as terrifying as its name suggests. Literally, the human eater. This wasn't your average croc. Anthropophagus was a giant armored nightmare, far larger than most crocodiles alive today. Adults reached lengths of up to 7.5 meters, 25 feet, and weighed a staggering 1.5 tons. For comparison, the largest recorded living crocodile, a saltwater crocodile named Lo Long, was only 6 meters, 20 feet long, and weighed 1.1 tons. At this massive size, Anthropophagus wasn't just big, it was lethal, equipped with a bite force capable of obliterating bone. Pair that with its armor-like scales, and it's clear why fighting back was rarely an option for its prey. Its formidable strength wasn't its only scary trait, though. It also had 2 prominent ridges, horn-like protrusions above its eyes, giving it a devilish, almost demonic appearance to match its deadly capabilities. While Anthropophagus was arguably the most fearsome crocodile to terrorize Homo habilis, it wasn't the largest. That dubious honor goes to its older relative, Crocodylus thorbjarnarssoni. This prehistoric titan roamed earlier in Homo habilis history and shared the same appetite for hominin prey. Though slightly bigger, reaching lengths of up to 8 meters, 26.2 feet, it wasn't dramatically larger than Anthropophagus. Still, its size earned it the title of the largest Crocodylus species ever discovered and one of the largest true crocodiles to ever exist. What set Thorbjarnarssoni apart wasn't just its size, but also its skull. Its head wasn't just enormous, it was unusually broad compared to other crocodiles, suggesting a unique adaptation. This wider skull likely allowed it to better grip and crush heavily armored prey, such as large turtles, in addition to the occasional hapless hominin. And given how scarce its remains are, there's a chance this giant may have grown even larger than our estimates suggest. In short, whether you were dealing with Anthropophagus or Thorbjarnarssoni, you were up against a predator that combined brute strength, specialized adaptations, and an appetite that made early humans a prime target. Despite its impressive size and adaptations, Crocodylus thorbjarnarssoni was no picky eater. It was likely an opportunistic predator, always on the lookout for an easy meal. And sometimes that meal came in the form of an unfortunate Homo habilis. One particularly famous specimen, OH7, the holotype for Homo habilis, may have met its end this way. Its fossilized leg and foot bones reveal large, deep puncture wounds that perfectly match the bite marks of a giant crocodile. It's not hard to imagine how it happened. The poor individual might have been near the water's edge, perhaps fishing or foraging, when the crocodile struck. The result? O7 likely lost a limb in the attack and, shortly after, its life. But if you thought that was unlucky, think again. Researchers believe the story of OH7 is even more tragic because the crocodile might not have been its only attacker. While examining the fossil skull, paleontologists noticed strange shallow grooves on its parietal bone. These marks didn't align with any known crocodile bite patterns. Instead, they looked eerily similar to damage caused by large cats. This led to the hypothesis that a leopard-sized predator had also taken a bite out of OH7. Talk about a rough day. However, there's still debate over whether this feline attack happened before or after OH7's death. It's possible the animal scavenged the remains after the crocodile was done, or maybe it was an earlier survived attack. Either way, the evidence paints a clear picture. Homo habilis had no shortage of predators to fear, and crocodiles and big cats, they were just the beginning. Early humans had to contend with a whole host of other threats, including predators still alive today. Panthera species like lions and leopards, packs of canids, birds of prey swooping down from above, and snakes slithering in the underbrush all contributed to Homo habilis's short, perilous existence. Snakes, in particular, likely played a significant role in hominin mortality. While direct evidence of snake attacks on Homo habilis is lacking, we know that snakes and humans share a long, tense history. From venomous strikes to ambushes in the grass, snakes represented a silent, lurking danger in Homo habilis's world. Just one more hazard in a life already packed with threats. Even today, snakes are responsible for tens of thousands of deaths annually in Africa alone, with venomous species being the deadliest offenders. In some uncontacted tribes, however, it's not venomous bites but attacks by large constricting snakes that pose the greatest threat, making them a leading cause of mortality in certain groups. Scientists suggest that snakes were such a significant danger to early humans that they may have triggered an evolutionary arms race between the two species. One theory posits that our enhanced ability to detect subtle movements and patterns might have evolved specifically to help us spot camouflaged snakes. Additionally, some research hints that primates, including humans, may be biologically hardwired to fear snakes, a survival instinct passed down through generations. With that in mind, it's all but guaranteed that Homo habilis faced frequent and terrifying encounters with these silent predators. But snakes weren't the only danger Homo habilis had to contend with. Their diet, and the foraging and climbing it required, brought them face to face with a host of dangerous animals beyond apex predators. Territorial herbivores and omnivores were a constant presence, and this roster of massive and often aggressive creatures included prehistoric rhinos, hippos, giant warthogs, elephants, giraffes, and various bovids. These animals may not have hunted humans, but they were no less deadly when provoked or startled. Even today, herbivores and omnivores in Africa are responsible for thousands of human deaths every year, and it's safe to say Homo habilis had no shortage of these lethal encounters either. If that weren't enough, the challenges of their diet extended beyond direct confrontations with dangerous animals. It also came with significant health drawbacks, particularly when it came to their teeth. Out of 26 studied individuals, only about 40% had teeth that could be considered in good condition. The rest? Severe wear and tear, cracked enamel, and chipped teeth were common, even in juveniles. And while this might not seem catastrophic at first, consider this. The oldest known specimen was just 25 years old, and many individuals under the age of 10 already showed significant dental problems. For Homo habilis, a lifetime of chewing tough, unprocessed food often translated into a painfully short lifespan. To really drive this point home, consider one particularly striking example. A Homo habilis individual who died at just 17 years old, but whose dental condition was so poor that it rivaled or even surpassed that of an elderly modern human with terrible hygiene. This alarming level of dental deterioration wasn't some rare anomaly. It was a widespread issue directly tied to the Homo habilis diet. But contrary to what you might think, the culprit wasn't just scavenged meat. It was likely a harsh combination of factors. Chewing tough plant material, gnawing on bones to extract marrow, and tearing through fibrous flesh all contributed to this extreme wear and tear. And because Homo habilis wasn't exactly at the top of the food chain, they rarely got first dibs on carcasses. This meant they were often left with slim pickings, poor quality scraps that were just as bad for their teeth as they were for their overall health. Their lack of food options wasn't just a dietary inconvenience, it was a deadly reality, exacerbated by the unforgiving environment of the Pleistocene epoch. During this time, Africa experienced intense climate fluctuations, marked by colder temperatures and increasing aridity. These harsh conditions severely limited available food sources, pushing populations to the brink of starvation, and as resources dwindled, Homo habilis was forced to scavenge more frequently, relying on meat to make up their calorie deficit. This growing dependence on scavenging brought even more danger, as it meant competing with other predators that were also struggling to survive in the same resource-scarce environment. With predators becoming more aggressive due to the strain of a collapsing ecosystem, scavenging became a high-risk endeavor that often ended in fatal encounters. And as if predatory threats weren't bad enough, there's evidence to suggest that worsening environmental conditions led to another grim reality: deaths caused by their own kind, or close relatives at least. Surprisingly, Homo habilis remains have been found in areas also inhabited by not just one, but 3 other Homo species, and even another hominin. While direct evidence of conflict is limited, it's not hard to imagine that competition over scarce resources may have turned these ancient relatives into fierce rivals, sometimes with deadly consequences. These rival species included Homo ergaster, Homo erectus, and Homo rudolfensis, along with the robust Paranthropus boisei. We know that encounters with these close relatives sometimes turned deadly, as evidenced by at least one Paranthropus specimen who was undoubtedly killed, perhaps even eaten, by a Homo habilis. In this particular instance, Homo habilis emerged victorious, but when it came to clashes with other Homo species, it likely found itself at a stark disadvantage for several key reasons. For starters, Homo habilis was the smallest member of the Homo genus at the time, and it was poorly adapted to a fully terrestrial lifestyle. Any confrontation on the ground would have given its larger, more land-savvy relatives a significant upper hand. Adding to the problem was its comparatively small brain. With an average brain size ranging between 500 and 687 cubic centimeters, Homo habilis had the second smallest brain of any known human species, trailing behind its competitors by a significant margin. For context, the brains of Homo erectus could sometimes be twice as large. This gap in brain power likely translated to a major disparity in intelligence, as reflected in their respective technologies. While Homo habilis relied on relatively primitive tools, Homo erectus had already mastered controlled fire and developed advanced implements like picks, knives, and cleavers, decisive advantages in any potential skirmish. And as if these challenges weren't enough, Homo habilis may have also faced threats from a creature that wasn't even human, the massive ape Deinopithecus. A close relative of modern baboons, Deinapithecus was an intimidating presence in its own right, with enormous fangs, immense muscle mass, and a likely penchant for aggression. In some ways, the prospect of facing this giant primate might have been even more terrifying than encounters with other Homo species. And when you realize that Deinapithecus could have been up to 3 times the size of Homo habilis, it's only fair to add this monstrous ape to the already overwhelming list of predators that plagued them. All in all, life for Homo habilis was an unrelenting gauntlet of survival challenges, and according to one study, the roughest part of an individual's life typically began around age 10. This was the point where mortality rates skyrocketed, though, ironically, just reaching the age of 10 was already a rare achievement. Another study estimates that a staggering 40% of Homo habilis individuals never made it to double digits. When you include infants and juveniles, this figure shoots up to an even grimmer 60%, meaning that more than half of Homo habilis died as children. Based on these numbers, researchers suggest the average age of death might have been lower than 12 years. This naturally begs the question, how in the world did Homo habilis survive as a species for as long as they did? One possible answer lies in their technology. While primitive compared to other human ancestors, Homo habilis tools enabled them to access critical resources like bone marrow and tough plant material that many other species couldn't reach. Additionally, there's a fascinating possibility that they constructed basic shelters. A 1.7 million-year-old windbreak or rudimentary hut found at one site might have been their handiwork, hinting at some ability to adapt to the harsh and shifting climates of the Pleistocene epoch. Strength in numbers may have also played a critical role. Paleontologists estimate that Homo habilis groups could have been as large as 85 individuals, which would have provided some degree of safety in numbers. Larger groups might have made it harder for predators to pick off any one individual, though judging by their sky-high mortality rates, it's clear this strategy wasn't foolproof. Ultimately, perhaps it was this crushing mortality rate that sealed their fate. Whatever the reason for their eventual extinction, one thing is indisputable: being a Homo habilis was an endlessly uphill battle.